The Vatican is a country smaller than many city blocks, yet inside it, there's an infinite amount of human creativity. Within minutes of entering, you're surrounded by more art than any one lifetime could digest. Here, centuries of faith, genius, and ambition converge across 1,400 rooms, chapels, and galleries to stretch across nearly 43,000 square meters of exhibition space, filled with masterpieces from the Roman, Renaissance, Ancient Egyptian, and Christian periods. Founded by Pope Julius II, the museums have, over the past 5 centuries, evolved into an astounding repository of Western artistic heritage, with additions from each subsequent pope. Let's pause for a moment at the immensity. 70,000 works, with only 20,000 of which on display at any time. And if you want to see everything the museum has to offer, you'll have to walk over 14 kilometers. Today, nearly 7 million people make the pilgrimage annually, making the Vatican Museums the second most visited museum in the world after the Louvre, and all within a country with a population of about 800 people. If you ever want to dive into the ideas and art history rabbit holes that don't quite fit the shape of a YouTube video, I write about all of that over on my Substack. It's the companion piece to this channel, and it's completely free. So if that sounds like something you'd like, click the link in the video description and subscribe so the new pieces find their way to you. Let's begin with perhaps the most iconic masterpiece in the Vatican, the Sistine Chapel. As you step in, the world outside, its hustle and modernity, fades to a whisper. Commissioned by Pope Julius II in 1508, Michelangelo spent the next 4 years painting over what once was a simple blue surface dotted with stars into one of humanity's greatest achievements. In this almost 500 square meter canvas, we see 9 scenes from the Book of Genesis. It is painted in fresco, a method of mural painting where pigments mixed with water are applied directly onto freshly laid wet lime plaster. And as the plaster and paint dry together, the color becomes a permanent part of the wall and architecture. Michelangelo drew most heavily on the words of the Old Testament. He broke the story into 3 chapters. First, we see the creation of the heavens and earth through the separation of light from darkness, the creation of sun, moon, and plants, and the separation of land and water. Then we see the creation of Adam and Eve and their expulsion from Eden. And finally, we see the tale of Noah through his sacrifice, the great flood, and the drunkenness of Noah. Among these, the creation of Adam specifically has become ubiquitous in modern culture. Here, Adam reclines on a grassy slope, his pose open and receptive, as God, encircled by angels, stretches forth a hand to bestow life. Their nearly touching fingertips have become a universal symbol of creation and human potential. The mirrored poses of God and Adam reinforce the biblical idea that humanity is made in God's image. Michelangelo places them against an intentionally bare background to emphasize the momentous act of creation itself, rather than any earthly setting it's taking place in. The ceiling's design as a whole is intricate. Michelangelo's painted architecture frames each individual scene and divides the space as to allow order as we take it all in. Surrounding the central scenes are 20 muscular nude figures called ignudi, as well as 12 figures, 7 prophets, and 5 sibyls who are women who prophesied, symbolizing the universality of the Christian message Michelangelo was trying to convey. Looking up at this artistic marvel, you wouldn't have guessed that it was done by someone who considered themselves primarily a sculptor, would you? But this new artistic path didn't hinder Michelangelo. Instead, it gave him an unprecedented understanding of human anatomy, gained through each figure he had sculpted. The fresco's jewel-toned colors, masterful use of light and shadow, and inventive perspective set a new standard in art and have left visitors in awe for 500 years. His figure's complex poses and his use of foreshortening to introduce the illusion of depth was groundbreaking at a time where artworks were flatter and had more decorative and symbolic compositions. The Sistine Chapel influenced countless artists that came after Michelangelo. which included the Renaissance masters Sandro Botticelli, Domenico Ghirlandaio, and Pietro Perugino. In fact, these three artists contributed to the chapel's walls. They painted scenes from the lives of Moses and Christ, uniting Old and New Testament themes. Even then, the impact of Michelangelo's work was immediate. Raphael, who was Michelangelo's younger contemporary, was so impressed by his work upon seeing it that he hurried back to his own room where the School of Athens resides and painted Michelangelo's likeness into the crowd of philosophers and geniuses as a tribute. And so today, millions of tourists crane their necks to enjoy the magnificence of Michelangelo's masterpiece. The Gallery of Maps stretches for 120 meters, which is about 3 stories tall in height, or as tall as the Great Pyramid of Giza. It is one of the Vatican Museum's most striking corridors, leading visitors toward the Sistine Chapel, enveloped in a panorama of painted geography. Pope Gregory XIII, widely remembered for introducing the Gregorian calendar, initiated the gallery's creation around 1580 so that he could study the geography of the Italian peninsula in detail without actually having to leave Vatican City. He assigned Ignazio Danti, a Dominican friar known for his mathematical and astronomical skills, to oversee the project over the next 5 years. Under Dante's direction, a team of Italian and Flemish artists created 40 expansive frescoes, each depicting a region of Italy along with its principal cities. These maps, which line the gallery's walls, were remarkable for their accuracy at the time. Many of them were painted with such care that they seemed almost three-dimensional. Rolling mountains, cityscapes, and even the whites of ocean waves were brought to life. According to the head of restoration at the Vatican Museums, Dante did an excellent job. The artists omitted what they didn't know for sure or didn't have details. They didn't bluff. The maps were arranged to guide viewers on a journey along the Apennine mountain range that stretches across the center of Italy. The regions facing the Tyrrhenian Sea are displayed on the side of the courtyard, and the regions facing the Adriatic Sea are on the side of the gardens. At both ends of the corridor, frescoes honor the most important Italian ports of the era: Venice, Ancona, Genoa, and Civitavecchia, as well as famous battles such as the Siege of Malta and the Battle of Lepanto. And as a final touch, we can see that each map is inscribed with the respective region's geopolitical traits. Above these cartographic marvels, the vaulted ceiling painted by the same artists depicts 51 scenes from the Old Testament and allegories of Christian virtues associated with each region below. This pairing invites us to consider how notions of the divine and the physical environment are inseparable within Italy's artistic tradition. Over the centuries, the gallery suffered considerable damage from dust, water, and misguided restorations, which at times obscured or altered the original details. However, a major restoration project, completed in 2016, used advanced conservation techniques to clean, repair, and stabilize the frescoes, which has restored them as closely as possible to their original state. Today, the Gallery of Maps remains the largest collection of painted maps in the world, and continues to captivate visitors, even as many hurry past it en route to the Sistine Chapel. Laocoön and His Sons, housed in the Pio Clementino Museum here, depicts a dramatic moment from ancient mythology. The legendary Trojan priest Laocoön and his 2 teenage sons are caught in a desperate fight against sea serpents. According to the Roman poet and writer Virgil in his epic poem of Aeneid, the gods who had decided that the Greeks were to win this war sent the sea serpents to kill Laocoön as a punishment for warning the Trojans about the Greeks' plan of deception via a wooden horse. What we see in front of us is a masterfully depicted sculpture that poignantly expresses human struggle. We see the serpents both bite and coil around the figures, intensifying the sense of panic and danger in the scene. The sons are immobilized by the snakes, and Laocoön's face is frozen in anguish. All 3 figures are nude with clearly defined, exaggerated musculature. We can even see the bunched muscles of Laocoön's torso as he reaches up to fight off the snakes. The statue, like all ancient Greek and Roman marble sculptures, would have been painted originally. The snakes likely painted green and their bite marks blood red, set against the tanned flesh of the figures. Unlike the common Christian portrayals of martyrdom, which often includes an element of hope or reward, the agony depicted here is absolute. There's no consolation, only the experience of suffering and impending loss. The sculpture was discovered in 1506 by a vineyard worker on Rome's Esquiline Hill and was excavated by the architect Giuliano da San Gallo. On the order of Pope Julius II, he rushed to the scene and brought Michelangelo with him so they could verify it, as the famed Laocoön referenced in Pliny the Elder's ancient text, Natural History. The first volume of this encyclopedic text, published in 77 CE, cataloged all known knowledge of the time. In a section on famous statues, Pliny described seeing the Laocoön in the palace of Emperor Titus, calling it a work to be preferred to all that the arts of painting and sculpture have produced. He credited the Rhodian sculptors Aisander, Polydoros, and Athenodoros as its creators. Among the many classical statues that were unearthed during this period of time, Laocoön and His Sons stood out both for its imposing size, about 2 meters high, and its remarkable preservation. There has, however, been debate among historians on Pliny's accuracy, noting that the sculpture's style aligns more with the Hellenistic period than ancient Greece, and that it was sculpted from multiple pieces of stone, rather than the single block Pliny described. Centuries later, the statue's intense suffering still grips anyone who stands in front of it, actualizing the human instinct of battling on and keeping a sense of hope, long after reason says surrender. A muscular figure without limbs nor head is seated on a rock with an animal hide. This renowned marble torso was discovered in Rome in the late 1400s and entered the Vatican collection sometime between 1530 and 1536. Etched on the seat is the artist's name, Apollonius, son of Nestor, an Athenian. He crafted this piece in the 1st century BC, inspired by a Greek bronze original dating from the 2nd century BC. The precise identity of the figure has remained a hypothetical, but the most accepted theory identifies it as the Greek hero Ajax, son of Telamon. According to the story, after the Trojan Wars, Ajax becomes distraught and furious when Achilles' armor is awarded to Odysseus instead of himself, and this drives him to the act of contemplating his suicide. This narrative arises from the pose of the figure. The head likely bowed in sorrow towards the right hand, which gripped the sword intended for his own death, the left hand holding the sheath. The scatter of holes all over are attachment points that indicate the location of now lost extremities. Although these physical cues allow for informed reconstructions based on comparative classical works, we won't ever know for certain. Artists of the Renaissance, especially Michelangelo, found the Belvedere torso an unmatched model of anatomical strength and dramatic potential. He studied it for hours a day and even earned the nickname Disciple of the Torso. He used the static intensity of its pose as the muse for his Ignudi figures and the Christ of the Last Judgment, though he never copied the pose exactly. And it didn't end with him. The torso's distinctive yet tender energy resonates in later works by many artists, most notably in Rodin's The Thinker, which portrays a similar inward focus. The sculpture we see in front of us, limbless and headless, still radiates a profound tension, but it's not one of physical movement. He's not going anywhere in the next few moments. The coiling of his muscles is of the decisive action he wants to take against himself. A meditation on death and the tension already created by the thought. Michelangelo Mauricio da Caravaggio, best known by his last name, painted the Entombment of Christ in 1604. Yet what he captured is timeless, the naked encounter with grief, loss, and the finality we resist accepting. It was commissioned by Girolamo Beatrice, one of Caravaggio's acquaintances, for his family chapel in Rome. The work traveled for years and across the continent before finding its home in 1817 at the Vatican. The first thing you might have noticed about this piece is the darkness, a classic feature of Caravaggio's paintings. This is done through a style called tenebrism, a pronounced version of chiaroscuro where the contrast between dark and light is almost violent as it changes without gradation. There's no background, no landscape, no architecture in the room, no context, just our figures pierced by a theatrical spotlight within the darkness. We've seen paintings of Christ's burial time and time again. But here, we see the moments just after Christ's removal from the cross. Caravaggio doesn't shield us with the comfort of ritual or the resolution of the tomb. No, he's showing us the pain. Christ's body limp, his life already departed, being lowered toward the anointing stone. The scene is brought into the foreground so closely that Christ's body seems almost to spill into our space. We are confronted with the raw human weight of death before the sanctity of burial draws a veil over our feelings. Surrounding him are 5 figures, each a mirror of a human stance toward loss. Physically, though, they are not divine ideals as in the works of High Renaissance. They are depicted realistically. They are ordinary fallible humans, the kind Caravaggio would have met in streets and taverns. Even Christ himself is not beautified. He is simply dead. Nicodemus and John the Evangelist bear the body. Their physical effort is felt. It's an act not just of duty, but of love. John's finger straight into the wound in Christ's side. It's unsettling, almost invasive. But isn't that how grief is? It is rarely a clean experience. Baroque art, the movement this painting falls into, at its best makes you feel not just intellectually moved, but physically implicated. Mary of Cleophas lifts her arms to the heavens in her pain and hopes for a different ending, perhaps one of resurrection. The Virgin Mary is portrayed as an older woman here. She wears a nun's habit and bows her head as she stretches her right arm to hover above his head, wanting to embrace her son one last time. She is carrying the quiet, exhausted sorrow etched into a mother's face that has endured too much. Beside her, Mary Magdalene tilts her gaze toward the body, her face partially obscured by shade. Her weeping is not hidden as she uses a white handkerchief to wipe her tears. Caravaggio's genius here is in refusing transcendence too soon. He holds us here to linger in the unbearable, to look straight at the tenderness, the helplessness, the bodily truth of mortality. And in doing so, the painting becomes less about Christ alone and more about us, what it means to love so deeply that loss undoes us, and yet to remain present to that undoing. Inside these halls, it's easy to lose your way. You walk past pieces of empires and traces of saints, ceilings where gods still tumble through clouds, and bodies come to life in marble. Each gallery insists on your attention, not by offering one neat narrative, but by demanding focus on many at once. And when we part ways, hopefully we carry with us a morsel of these artists' humanities that feel at home alongside ours.